Well, Eskom's financial woes are once again in the spotlight. The Auditor-General's report to Parliament's Scopa committee reveals ongoing concerns about irregular expenditure, wasteful spending and criminal losses. And this all contributes to the rising electricity costs you're paying at home. Let's talk about this with the Eskom Chair, Dr. Mteto Nyati, about how he plans to address these issues and discuss what's being done to bring relief to consumers. Good morning, Dr. Nyati, and thanks always for your time. Contrary to the theme, I guess, of a lot of recent interviews, just celebrating some of the wins at Eskom, it must be a hard pill to swallow when the AG says that lax oversight at Eskom is what's actually driving the high cost of electricity out there. And then you've got other developments in terms of the Special Investigation Unit uncovering grand corruption at Eskom, which involves your own staff.
Yeah, good morning, Iman, and good morning to your viewers as well. And thank you for having us. Look, you're saying it must be a difficult pill to swallow. One of the things that we have always been clear about as the board was to try and understand what are the systemic issues that we're facing Eskom. So when we joined this board 2.5 years ago, we took a step back and tried to understand what are those things that we need to address. And we came up with really 9 big things. And all of them are falling under 3 categories. The first one was around operational issues. The second bit was on the financial issues. And then the third one was on sustainability. Briefly, on operational issues, things like unreliability of the plant, things like grid capacity, and things like a dysfunctional organizational culture, they fell under that category of operational. So many of you would look at load shedding. Load shedding is just one of those operational issues. We needed to also address the grid capacity and also internally a dysfunctional organizational culture. So when it came to the financial side of things, there were also really 3 big things there. The problem that we had around the weak balance sheet of the organization. So that was the first one. The issue of tariffs. And also, and last was the fact that there were non-paying payment for the services that were offering the market. So those were the 3 big systemic issues under financial. And then under the sustainability of the organization, there's one, the outdated operating model or business model of Eskom. Many organizations throughout the world have unbundled as an entity like Eskom into 3 different entities that were market related and were comparative, and we were still stuck with that old business model. Transition into clean energy, and last but not least, which is really the point that you are highlighting here, the fact that we still were having fraud, corruption within Eskom, and criminality. So those were the 9 big systemic issues. So what we are hearing now from the Auditor-General and everybody else is not a surprise to us. It is something that we have paid attention to from the word go. It's just that it may be something that is coming out in the public now.
Yeah.
And it's also reflecting of something that has happened almost 1.5 years ago. It's not reflecting the current reality. But yeah, it is something that is disturbing us. It has disturbed us from the word go.
Okay, we'll talk about the current reality, but to outsiders, right, and experts who aren't inside, there are some things we see as obvious areas where Eskom can ensure that there is good governance and good accountability when it comes to its accounting processes and its finances. So I want to go to one of the things the AG had said in briefing Parliament's Standing Committee on Public Accounts, this is Scopa, on Eskom's annual report and financial statements for the 23-24 financial year. You've received a qualified audit opinion for the 23-24 financial year. Now, my understanding is that a qualified report has material misstatements. I mean, the definition of a qualified report is that it encompasses material misstatements. There's insufficient evidence to conclude that specific amounts in the annual report are not materially misstated. So that sounds like something from an accounting perspective that Eskom was unable to do. So just help us understand how this actually happens and how you explain it, not only to the board, but to Eskom and to the public in general. And then I guess the more serious question is, well, what's to be done about it then?
I think, there are many reasons behind a qualified audit. One of them could be misstatements. But in our case, the big issues that we're facing is that there were findings that were made the previous year, and then you look at the next financial year, you find that things were instead of getting better, they're getting worse. And there is no demonstration from management and also from the board that things need to be turning around. So that is really also what we found when we got into the organization. When I speak about an organizational culture that was dysfunctional, it's linked directly to that point, Iman. What I mean by that is that we found that there were managers that were not managing, and there were leaders that were not leading. By that I mean, you will identify that there's a problem in a particular area, and you have to drive consequences, consequence management, and none of that ends up being done. And then you dig deeper. Then you realize that you've got a problem around weak leadership, people who should not be in the position that you're occupying. So one of the big things that you have to do in an environment like that is to start to say, if to create an environment where there is an ethical behavior and ethical culture, it has to start from the top, So we have prioritized as the board appointing leaders throughout the business that reflect the kind of culture that we would like to have. So starting from the choice of a CEO, when I was asked, why did you choose Dan, besides his technical abilities, is also the fact that this is somebody who left Eskom because he could not stand some of the things that he was being asked to do, and that's the kind of leader that you have. And he has been, since now almost a year, over a year, been building a team whose role it is to make sure that they display and role model the kind of culture that would like to have. A culture, I call it tough love, where you if people are doing well, of course, you reward them. But if people are not doing the right things, you have to take tough action around those people.
Well, let's talk about consequence management, Dr. Nyati, because there are two things happening. We understand that the board, Eskom, all its managers and leaders have to change, and they also have to do the daily operational work. But South Africans are feeling the brunt of these decisions, a lack of decisions, lack of accountability at Eskom. So we don't have the luxury of saying, let the organizational culture transformation process take root. It's going to bear fruit, 5 years from now, because these things take time. In fact, one of the things the AG did say to Parliament was that Eskom's continued lack of consequence management and accountability is adversely affecting primary energy costs. So they've made that link directly. What can you say to us about urgent, robust consequence management there at Eskom to root out all of these people, the managers who aren't managing, the leaders who aren't leading, the weak leadership that you have? How robust has that process been? Have there been I don't want to say mass layoffs, of course, in this economy, we don't talk about layoffs, but have you targeted the right people and gotten rid of them?
We have indeed, if you look just at the top, and I'm just going to limit that at the top. We have brought in so many leaders that are having the kind of values that we need to have in the organization. So one of the problems when it comes to governance is that people would deliberately weaken the internal controls so that they can be able to do what they want to do, and that was a deliberate action by state capture people within Eskom. That's what they were doing. So you have to then come in and tighten those controls. You have to know what is it that you need to be focusing on. And that means you have to bring people that have got experience in these matters and be able to quickly identify where the weaknesses are and tighten and strengthen the controls. And some of the action, for example, most of this ends up being done via IT systems. So we have been able to bring a very experienced leader coming from the banking industry who has worked for two of the large banks in the IT space. And you can understand in a banking environment some of the challenges that they face with regards to fraud and etc. You want to have that kind of experience coming into your environment within a very short period of time. What he has been able to uncover and the kind of controls that he has been able to put in, this is exactly what we need, leaders that are able to do that, but at the same time is able to transfer his own knowledge into the organization and building the capacity of the organization. Also, for example, in things like forensic and security, we found that some of the leaders in those spaces were questionable. So we had to make some big changes there and brought in people that have got deep experience around forensic, around also intelligence, because there are people, intelligence gathering within the organization, something that is critical, and bringing those people has made a huge difference.
All right, but so then we see the SIU, and again, to be fair to you, this investigation outcome that they're now sharing, which is being reported on now, has been, I think, a decades-long process, so that that excludes or is beyond your time frame. But what you're sitting with, that the SIU is telling us in Eskom today, is a 1 billion rand corruption scheme involving your staffers. And when you look at the categories, again, when I go to things like what might be the lowest hanging fruit for Eskom to resolve, they talk about hundreds of Eskom employees who have financial ties to the vendors that are being hired. Surely that would be an easy thing to be able to detect. You talk about the sophisticated ICT systems now to be able to detect and perhaps prevent things like this, yet it's still happening. Then there's also companies who have been engaged in dubious practices. They're using one of your processes, which is the request for quotation processes. Anyway, they outline a litany of areas where there are blind spots in Eskom system allowing this level of corruption to take place.
So one of the first things that we did as the board when we joined is to look exactly at this point. So again, there's always like a time lag with this. When it's coming out, it looks like it's something that's happening now, when in reality, this is something that we picked up almost a year ago. I mentioned publicly that we implemented an artificial intelligence system called Hunter that was able to identify, instead of accusing each and every one of the employees of Eskom of being involved in corruption, we had narrowed down to a couple of thousand people that we were doing investigation around. And it is through this IT system and artificial intelligence that we're able to identify and isolate these people, linking to things like the declaration of their own interest or lack of declaring interest in the different companies that were doing business with Eskom. With all of that information, we currently are, you're seeing now, you think that SIU is something that is different from us. We are actually working alongside the SIU with the unit that we have internally, working on these cases. It's not like they are separate out there. We are working together with them.
All right. Dr. Nyati, just final really quickly, is the Festival of Feeding coming to an end at Eskom?
It is coming to an end. I mean, people are feeling it. It is not. It's not nice. If you are a criminal within Eskom, it's just a matter of time that you are going to be going to jail. You are going to be out of the system, and because of the laser focus that we have, And we know that this is not something that we can win all by ourselves. Hence, the partnership with South African Police Service and the partnership with SIU and the partnership with a number of forensic companies that are giving us the technical capability to be able to address this huge problem that we found in this organization.